Hey there, all you people. Hey there, all you people. It's a wonderful day for nuts. And on that, actually, we're going to spend a lot of time this week talking about, or leading up to, really over the next couple of weeks, political parties, elections, and the media. Why, you may ask, we're taking this brief pause in constitutional understanding is because it's, one, these are important topics to understand for American government, but two, we have a presidential election coming up, and I haven't done a lot of talking about it with you guys. And it wasn't because I didn't intend to, it's because I wanted to narrow it down into a 1 to 2 week period before election day, which I've done. So now we're going to talk about how elections work, particularly presidential elections. We're going to talk about the role that political parties play in this government, and we're also going to talk about the role of the media in influencing government. So, without further ado, let me introduce you your notes. Make sure you have a sheet of paper out to take notes. Presidential election process. Ooh. Okay, there we go. Before I get weirder. Move. There you go. We're not going to do that. Step 1 in the presidential election process. Candidates announce their intent to run. So we're talking about basically how an individual becomes president. This is the theme of today's notes. It's important to understand, and it makes sense of a lot of the things you've maybe seen already in the news. But a candidate announces their intent to run for president as the first step. Oftentimes, obviously, he's a natural-born citizen. He's at least 35 years old, and he's resident of the United States for 14 years. He's also never been president twice before. Oftentimes, these are people that are fairly well known, but sometimes you get people that aren't well known as well that run for president. Moving on, maybe. There we go. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Step 2, the candidate begins campaigning to win delegates for each state. You see, a delegate is a person sent to act on behalf of others. Obviously, the candidate is a person running for public office, but essentially, in a primary system, each candidate travels to each state hoping to win the primary or the caucus and accumulate the most delegates leading up to the convention of the party. Come on. Now, there are, of course, non-party and independent candidates, and we'll talk more about that later this week. But it varies by state. Independent candidates must collect signatures on a petition to get on the ballot. Not eligible for public funds for their campaigns must continue to fundraise independently. Of course, there's always the famous Ralph Nader, who ran for president like 3 or 4 times. Also, when you're running in the primary system to become the nominee for your party, you're going to be competing in primaries and caucuses. A state conducts primary or caucuses to award delegates to the preferred party choice of that state. A caucus is where party leaders and supporters gather to discuss and choose a candidate for their party publicly, often meeting in gymnasiums and churches, and sometimes even literally in a person's house. An Iowa caucus is the first to kick off the process. Iowa gets to decide first every year. I don't know why it gets to be Iowa, who will be their choice from a particular party. So, primary elections are probably a little bit easier to understand. Members of a party cast secret ballots to see which candidate has the most support and wins the state's delegates. Becoming more popular in recent years, the New Hampshire primary is the first primary in the primary system. Moving on. Also, typically in the primary process, there tends to be a special day called Super Tuesday. After Iowa, New Hampshire, and a couple of other small states, there tends to be one big day, sometime in the early spring or late winter, where like 10 states will hold their primary and caucus on the same night. Normally, the candidate that does the best on Super Tuesday from either party in caucuses and primaries and wins the most delegates on that day, almost usually, I'll use that word, ends up being the nominee for the parties chosen. So, after a candidate wraps up the delegate process through the primary and caucuses, they then can proceed to national conventions. A national political party meets for conventions to select their nominees to run for president. Delegates gather from different states to choose a candidate for the political party. The winner chooses a running mate, vice president, and the delegates ratify the choice. The party platform is announced, the platform being the stance the party takes on a number of issues, including the issues they will focus on in their campaign. A main issue, for example, of Obama in 2008 was health care. Conventions are often very raucous, party-like affairs, as these pictures show. Balloons and streamers all raining down from the sky. It is quite the show. Step 5, obviously, is the debates and general election. This is where we're at right now. Debates are held before primary elections and after national conventions. Candidates take positions on issues and share their beliefs on how they will improve the country. Also helps inform voters about each candidate, decide who they will vote for in the general election. General elections are always held on the first Tuesday of November after the first Monday. Boy, that's confusing, but that's how it's done. Citizens who are registered to vote cast secret ballots. Must be at least 18 years or older to vote. These ballots decide how many electoral votes each candidate will get. So every state has a certain amount of electoral votes, right? The night of the general election, the popular vote is reported. The candidate with the most popular votes does not necessarily win, however. We have what we call an electoral college in this country. We have 538 members, and they determine who the president will be. A state's number of electors is determined by the number of representatives plus number of senators. Ohio has 18 electors. In December, the electors vote for the candidate based on the citizen. And the citizens will from the state they represent, though they are not required to. Candidates must get a majority of the electoral vote to win. 270 is the current majority. If no candidate gets the majority, the House of Representatives shall choose the president. So, actually, in the election of 1824, this is exactly what happened. Nobody received a majority of the votes. However, Andrew Jackson did receive, technically, I believe, the most votes and the most electoral votes, but not a majority, 50+%. So it went to the House, where, in a stunning bombshell, they didn't choose Andrew Jackson, the one who received the most votes and the most electoral votes, but they chose, in scandalous decision, John Quincy Adams, who's a very smart, intelligent man, but surprisingly, of course, didn't get the majority of the votes in the actual general election. Created quite an uproar. Also, you don't have to win the popular vote in order to win the Electoral College. For example, in the election of 2000, George W. Bush narrowly lost the popular vote, but narrowly won the Electoral College, making him President of the United States, not Al Gore. And of course, on election night, oftentimes you get to know the winner, very often, of whoever wins the most electoral votes, such as in 2008. All right, that is our lecture for you guys today. Go ahead and email me at ksearcy@spartan.limacity.schools.org if you have any more questions about how a president becomes a president.